November 18, 1942, skies above Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. An unnamed Zero pilot squeezed the control stick as unfamiliar, twin-boom American fighters clawed upward from the runway. On that date, flyers of the 339th Fighter Squadron became the first Lightning pilots to deliberately engage Japanese fighters, a turning point that began cracking the belief in Japanese aerial invulnerability. Twin engines, double tails, climbing like nothing we've ever faced, he would tell his squadron commander at Rabaul, phrasing that exposed the first visible breaks in 3 years of perceived dominance. What he had just watched through the canopy, cut against the dogma Japanese naval air training had drilled into him, the American P-38 Lightnings, those odd twin-boom machines Japanese intelligence had dismissed as heavy and awkward, had surged from sea level to combat height faster than his Mitsubishi A6M could manage. In China, in the Philippines, even during the Pearl Harbor strike, the Zero had seemed supreme. No Allied fighter matched its initial climb or its tight turning at low speed. Yet here, over a blood-stained island, American twin-engined fighters were dictating the fight from levels the Zero struggled to attain. In this first encounter, pilots from the 339th claimed 3 Japanese aircraft, attacking from altitudes that rendered the Zero's legendary turn inside useless. The arithmetic of who owned the sky was being rewritten, not on chalkboards about dogfighting theory, but by raw high-altitude performance that started to dissolve assumptions Japanese aviators carried about their own invulnerability, their mounts, and the opponent they faced. Confidence under the rising sun dimmed. The erosion of Japanese air superiority had really begun before that November morning, though few inside the Imperial Navy would have accepted it. Since December 7, 1941, Japanese naval aviators had swept across the Pacific, trailing an aura of inevitability. The Mitsubishi A6M, long-range, razor-tight turns, and highly trained pilots had earned a fearsome reputation. A top speed around 332 mph at best height looked impressive, and the ability to outturn anything Allied made it deadly in the classic close-in fight. Among the elite stood Petty Officer First Class Saburo Sakai, credited multiple times, a veteran of China and survivor of countless engagements. By 1940, he had scored 13 victories in Borneo before transfer to Lae, New Guinea, where he would claim the majority of his eventual 64. His assurance, like that of his peers, seemed absolute. Lieutenant Junichi Sasai, Sakai's direct superior, told his men before operations that the American fighters over the Guadalcanal area were likely carrier-borne Navy types, not Army machines. They expected F-4F Wildcats from carriers backing the invasion, aircraft they had beaten repeatedly. The opening half of 1942 appeared to confirm the edge. Obsolete Brewster Buffaloes fell over Singapore, Curtiss P-40 Warhawks were savaged over Java, and Hurricanes were brushed aside in Burma. The Zero's early dominance in the Pacific looked near total. Even when newer Allied types appeared, Japanese pilots carried a psychological lead born of deeper training, proven tactics from China, and habitual victory. Still, by mid-1942, intelligence briefings whispered about a new American fighter that didn't fit prior categories. Twin engines, twin tails, heavy nose guns. Most squadron leaders shrugged. How could a two-engine fighter threaten the light, nimble Zero? Doctrine built around the decisive clash, and individual skill had no shelf to place what was on the way. The Lightning's arrival changed the frame. The P-38 became the war's only truly successful twin-engined daylight fighter. It was Lockheed's response to a February 1937 U.S. Army call for a long-range interceptor. Clarence Kelly Johnson's team produced a machine that pushed limits, topping 400 km/h, reaching toward 40,000 feet, and flying missions that stretched beyond 1,000 miles. Twin Allison V-1710s with turbo-superchargers, about 150 horsepower each, gave it performance figures Japanese engineers considered improbable. Where the Zero chased maximum agility by shaving weight, early versions lacked armor and self-sealing tanks, the Lightning embodied another philosophy entirely: speed, height, concentrated fire, and the ability to survive hits. Its theater debut was subdued and rough around the edges. The first P-38s to reach Australia revealed design issues that postponed combat use. By late 1942, fixes filtered in, and seasoned P-40 pilots began moving to the new type. The 49th Fighter Group still flew P-40s, but transition loomed. Those pilots brought hard lessons. Chief among them: never accept a turning contest with a Zero. The Lightning would let them fight by their rules. First blood over the Solomons came November 18, 1942, when the 339th, operating from Henderson, engaged Japanese fighters while escorting B-17 flying fortresses. The exchange shocked both sides. Japanese escorts first sighted the odd twin-boom silhouettes shouldering upward from the south. Initial reactions were confusion. Bombers, reconnaissance types. The climb rate said neither. By the time recognition set in, the Lightnings had already stacked a 5,000-foot advantage. They patrolled above the Zero's sweet spot, used superior speed at altitude to slide into position, then dropped like weighted spears, big fighters smashing into Zeros that could not answer in time. The performance math was stark. The Zero's low-speed agility remained famous, but high-speed handling at height was inferior. Above roughly 250 psi-ph, control forces grew heavy. Past 300 maneuvering degraded rapidly. The P-38, especially later with hydraulically boosted ailerons, retained authority in high-speed dives approaching 500 km/h. The deeper shock was conceptual. The Lightning embodied a brand of aerial warfare Japanese culture hadn't anticipated. Its nose battery, 450 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon, threw a single, focused stream without the convergence gymnastics of wing guns. Turbo-superchargers, equally alien to Japanese expectations, let the P-38 keep power where the air thinned and muted exhaust enough that Lightnings often arrived with minimal warning. The Zero's Sakai engine, making about 950 horsepower at sea level, hemorrhaged power with height. By 20,000 feet, it struggled to produce 3/4 of that. The P-38's Allisons held their punch much higher, handing Americans the vertical dimension. By early 1943, the strain bled into squadron logs and private letters. The well-cultivated mythology of the Zero was cracking. Pilots spoke of a constant edge of tension, aware a P-38 could appear from anywhere. Lieutenant Commander Tadashi Nakajima described what became a textbook two-ship trap. One Wildcat drew him in. The wingman slashed in from the side. He came back furious after diving away to live. That was harsh enough, until the Lightning compounded it. Sakai later conceded that Zero fighters could not reliably defeat P-38s except in rare, favorable setups, words that weighed heavily inside the fighter community. Operational reality was worse than any individual scoreline. Range reshaped the map. With drop tanks, the Lightning stretched to roughly 1,600 miles, escorting deep or sweeping far from home. Japanese pilots could no longer count on fresh numbers over friendly bases. The most public demonstration arrived April 18, 1943. 16 P-38s flew a 435-mile overwater interception to ambush Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Major John Mitchell led them at 50 feet above the Pacific to hide from radar, then up to the precise point at the precise moment. They cut down Japan's most revered naval leader despite zero escort. Shock that rippled through every ready room. Kenji Yanagi, one of the escorts that day, recounted Lightning pilots materializing as if from nowhere, striking with planned precision and leaving before an effective counter. Planning fused to performance in a way Japan could not replicate. Throughout 1943, American pilots refined methods to wring every advantage from the platform. High side passes, boom and zoom slashes, fire, then climb back beyond reach before a counter could form. Japanese fighters were left helpless against disciplined energy fighting. The first tallied duel, some sources cite, ended 15 Japanese down to 1 P-38. Lopsided outcomes multiplied as Lightning crews learned their mount. Countermeasures followed: dive breaks to force overshoots, bait to draw Lightnings into low-altitude turning fights, looser formations to sharpen lookout. But none paid consistently. The raw gap in performance was too large. Behind that gap stood industry. More than 10,000 P-38s would be built across 18 principal variants, each folding frontline feedback into metal. The P-38J, arriving in late 1943, added boosted ailerons to sharpen roll, fixes for frigid European cockpits, and improved turbo-superchargers for even stronger high-altitude performance. Japanese engineering, by contrast, struggled to squeeze incremental gains from the Zero. Captain Minoru Genda, key tactician behind Pearl Harbor, privately acknowledged by mid-1943 that Japan wasn't up against a single superior fighter, but an American system of continuous improvement. Each new U.S. type appeared better than the last. Pilot quality diverged just as sharply. By mid-1943, Japan was losing veterans faster than replacements could be formed. Training programs collapsed from 2 years to under 6 months. Newly minted pilots often arrived with fewer than 200 hours. Many Americans, by comparison, reached combat with 400, 600 hours, trained in advanced units, studied gun camera film, and flew multiple types before touching a Lightning, then took specialized instruction on twin-engine operations and high-altitude tactics. The difference showed in every engagement. The P-38's 2 engines added something Japanese pilots hadn't fully tallied: survivability. A battered Lightning could sometimes limp home on one motor, over ocean that mattered. Single-engine Japanese fighters lived or died on mechanical luck. The Zero's celebrated range came at the price of minimal armor and unprotected tanks in early versions. One unlucky hit could mean fire or the sea. By late 1943, Japanese intelligence report urged new caution: avoid duels with the Lightning. Note its fearsome diving speed, accurate fire, and habit of appearing from above. A captured December document labeled the P-38 the most dangerous American fighter in the Pacific and advised avoiding engagement unless enjoying both overwhelming numbers and the positional advantage, a reversal of the warrior ethos that had defined naval aviation, telling hunters to run, cut to the bone. American Lightning aces underlined the trend. Major Richard Dick Bong reached 40 victories, everyone in P-38s. Major Thomas B. McGuire reached 38 before his death in January 1945. In less than 2 years, those tallies matched or exceeded what many Japanese aces built over 3 or 4. Across the Pacific, P-38s destroyed more than 1,800 Japanese aircraft, losses that also meant veteran pilots Japan could not replace. Every downed airframe further hollowed the force as crash course training struggled to produce even basic competence. The airframe kept evolving. Through 1944, the P-38L brought uprated engines for better power at height, improved cooling, and rocket rails for ground attack, hauling real bomb loads without giving up the punch of the nose battery. Watching lightning sweep the air one day and crack ground targets the next, Japanese airmen realized they were facing not merely a fighter, but a versatile weapon system. The cultural shock bit deeper. Japanese doctrine raised air combat to an art. Individual skill and spirit at the center. Americans treated it as an engineering problem. Optimize technology and procedure, then scale it. Commander Masatake Okumiya, analyzing reports, later wrote that they could not accept that spirit alone wasn't enough. Each account of P-38 superiority drew demands for more zeal, more aggression, confusing courage with capability. That blindness slowed adaptation. While Americans iterated relentlessly, Japanese training kept emphasizing aerobatics and single combat finesse, skills that availed little against an enemy refusing to fight on those terms. By mid-1944, some Lightnings even carried early airborne radar for night work, technology Japan lacked and couldn't counter. Night, once a sanctuary, turned perilous. The June 1944 carrier clash, the Philippine Sea, didn't feature P-38s, but their fingerprints were on the shattered quality of Japanese pilots now facing U.S. Navy Hellcats. Years of attrition to P-38s and other American types had drained Japan's core. The Marianas Turkey Shoot, which saw 300-plus Japanese aircraft downed for minimal American loss, was the harvest of seeds the Lightning helped plant. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa later admitted his men lacked both experience and the machines to match Americans. As 1944 slipped into 1945, countermeasures turned desperate, ramming, phosphorus AA shells aimed at Lightning fuel systems, and attempts to field twin-engine fighters of their own. The Kawasaki Ki-102 reached service in 1945 in limited numbers, slower, climbing poorly, and dogged by engine reliability. Its very arrival highlighted how far behind Japan had fallen. By early 1945, talk of air superiority faded. Pilots spoke of survival. The P-38 and its American peers owned the sky. Sakai himself would say the Lightning broke the Zero pilot's morale. The statistics echoed him. More than 1,800 Japanese machines destroyed by P-38s, Bong at 40, McGuire at 38. Lightning pilots claiming more Japanese aircraft than any other U.S. Army Air Force's fighter. On the other side, Japan lost over 90% of the veterans who began the war. By 1945, a typical Japanese pilot might have fewer than 100 hours. They were less warriors than sacrifices sent against an opponent they could not beat. After surrender, occupation interviews laid the psychology bare. Okumiya acknowledged, "The P-38 broke our confidence completely. It wasn't merely faster or more heavily armed, it embodied a method of air war Japan could not match." One pilot recalled his first encounter, an American aircraft that could outrun, outclimb, and outdive what they had believed was the world's best fighter. Post-war technical comparisons made the mismatch plain. Mitsubishi A6M, around 332 MEPS at best height, service ceiling near 33,000 feet, laboring above 25,000, initial climb roughly 3,100 feet per minute, dropping quickly with altitude, superb range near 1,030 miles, armament of two 7.7mm guns and two 20mm cannon with limited ammunition, early armor, and tank protection. Absent. Lockheed P-38L, better than 400mm power, ceiling near 44,000 feet. Sea level climb around 4,150 feet per minute, range near 1,600 miles with drop tanks. 4 50s plus a 20mm in the nose, armored pilot protection and self-sealing tanks standard. The Zero had been optimized for a different war, one won by skillful maneuver. The Lightning represented industrial war, decided by technology, production, and steady upgrades. Industry told the deeper story. Lockheed produced over 10,000 Lightnings. Japan built a similar total of Zeros, but over more years and with quality sliding as resources thinned. American assembly line methods, perfected in the car industry, turned out P-38s faster than Japan could form pilots. Each Lightning packed thousands of precision parts, turbo-superchargers, and constant speed propellers. Industrial capability. Japan couldn't duplicate at scale. Allison engines were interchangeable and dependable. Japanese power plants often demanded careful hand fitting. Training widened the gulf. By 1944, P-38 pilots commonly logged more than 100 hours in twin-engine trainers before ever strapping into the Lightning. They practiced engine outwork and asymmetric thrust, high-altitude physiology and oxygen systems, gunnery with camera film and towed sleeves, formation and mutual support, escape and evasion, and deep systems knowledge. Japanese trainees often received 50 or 100 hours of basics, sparse tactical instruction, minimal live gunnery due to ammunition shortages, no specialized high-altitude training, and increasing emphasis on spirit, culminating in preparation for special attack missions. The result was inevitable. Americans arrived as professionals. Too many Japanese arrived barely ready. Tactics shifted because the P-38 forced the change. The traditional turning duel that had defined air combat since World War I no longer ruled the sky. Under 200 mph, a P-38 could not outturn an AS-6M, but superior speed and climb let it fight in energy. American pilots refined the high-side pass, approach from above and behind, slice through the formation firing, then zoom back up before a counter could form. Without Lightning performance, the play would have been impossible. Japanese units tried stacked altitudes, but that dispersed strength and strained coordination. Clouds proved no shelter. The P-38's speed let it cover huge areas quickly, flushing targets wherever they drifted. Even appearance worked as a weapon. The twin-boom outline, initially mocked as clumsy, became a symbol of American technological edge that unsettled pilots before combat began. Ground crews reported that rumors of P-38s in an area delayed missions or triggered demands for more escort. The nickname some Japanese used, 2 planes, 1 pilot, captured confusion and grudging respect. Strategically, the Lightning shifted planning assumptions. Japanese strategy had assumed rough air parity that courage could tilt. The P-38 demonstrated that technology could skew the field so far that spirit no longer mattered. That realization fed grim choices, accelerating kamikaze use as orthodox combat failed, husbanding the few veterans for home defense, abandoning offensive air operations by mid-1944, chasing miracle projects, and quietly recognizing that conventional victory was beyond reach. Admiral Somu Toyota, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, privately conceded in October 1944 that they no longer possessed an air arm capable of normal operations. American fighters, especially the P-38, had ended their ability to contest the sky. Maintenance and logistics were victories too. Twin-engine complexity worried planners, yet the P-38 showcased American support power. Units kept operational rates often above 80%, even on primitive island strips. Japanese formations flying simpler singles struggled to keep half their aircraft serviceable by 1944. U.S. maintainers, many with civilian aviation and automotive experience, brought standardized tools, procedures, and preventive schedules. Japanese maintenance leaned on individual craftsmanship rather than system. Navigation exposed another gap. P-38s equipped with radio direction finding could navigate the Pacific's breadth with precision, homing on beacons, finding base in bad weather, hitting time on target to the minute. Japanese pilots still relied primarily on dead reckoning and visual fixes, limiting flexibility. The Yamamoto intercept, 435 miles over empty ocean to a point in time and space, would have been nearly impossible with Japan's wartime tools. All this shattered naval aviation's foundation. After Midway, rebuilt carrier groups bled again during the island campaigns under hammering from Lightnings and other U.S. types. By 1944, Japanese carriers sailed with half-strength groups of undertrained pilots. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, warned before the Philippine Sea that his men could barely land aboard, asking them to fight P-38s and Hellcats, sent them to certain death. The cultural shock ran wider. Bushido's ideals, spirit and individual prowess, proved inadequate against industrial war. Younger officers began questioning doctrine itself. Survivors returning from the front told of American technology undercutting years of propaganda about Western decadence and Japanese moral superiority. Economics told the same tale. A P-38 cost roughly $97,000 in 1944, hardly cheap, yet America built them by the thousand. Japan struggled to produce far cheaper types in meaningful numbers. The aluminum for a single Lightning could exceed a factory's monthly allocation by 1944. Superchargers, precision instruments, constant speed props. Each item represented industrial depth Japan lacked. Pilot testimonies remained the strongest proof. Men trained never to admit weakness later converged on the same point. The Lightning held the edge. Sakai summarized the P-38's method clearly. Patrol above the Zero's world. Use speed aloft to pick the moment, then plunge to smash hapless fighters below. Humiliation did not end with dogfights. Photo recon Lightnings compiled the bulk of Pacific aerial imagery. Positions, movements, logistics routes mapped constantly. The same shape that dominated in combat charted defeat in crisp frames. The F-5 reconnaissance variant, guns removed but performance intact, could photograph with impunity. Interceptors sent to stop it often could not climb fast or high enough. The shock did not fade with 1945. It shaped post-war aviation, doctrine, and attitudes toward technology. Many surviving Japanese pilots became advocates for modernization. They had learned that courage without capability was a blind alley. Sakai, later a successful businessman, often said the Lightning taught Japan never again to fall behind technologically. Industrial power, not warrior spirit, decides modern war. Rapid Lightning evolution showcased American innovation speed. Compressibility in dives drove the adoption of dive flaps. Freezing cockpits drove better heating. Roll rate complaints led to boosted ailerons. Japanese development, hemmed in by scarcity and institutional inertia, couldn't match the tempo. The Zero that flew in 1945 was essentially the Pearl Harbor machine with limited tweaks. The P-38L of 1945 was markedly superior to the P-38E of 1942. General George Kenney, commanding Allied air in the Southwest Pacific, put it simply: Lightning pilots at altitude chose when and where to fight, with ruinous results for Japanese flyers. That freedom to dictate terms was a revolution Japanese doctrine never solved. By war's end, America's top two aces had 78 victories between them in P-38s. Japan's top surviving ace had 64 over 6 years. The math of losses was not survivable for Japan. In truth, Lightning dominance revealed more than hardware. It exposed differences in how nations waged war, in industry, innovation, culture, and strategy. Japan had prepared for a short, decisive campaign where spirit might overcome material gaps. The P-38 embodied America's long war approach, where technology and production set the outcome. The shock Japanese pilots felt when they could neither outrun nor outclimb the Lightning was, in essence, the shock of meeting modernity. Science, engineering, and management applied relentlessly to combat. Against that, traditions, however noble, could not prevail. The human cost sat behind every figure. Thousands of Japanese pilots, many with under 100 hours, were thrown into the air in aging designs against P-38s. They knew the odds. Letters recovered after the war speak of resignation. One young flyer wrote before his final sortie, "Mother, tomorrow I face the twin-tailed devils. I do not expect to return. They fly higher and faster than we can imagine. I will do my duty, but I know it is hopeless." He died near Rabaul in March 1944. One voice among thousands. Courage spent against a gap courage alone could not bridge. The Lightning's influence outlived the conflict. It helped shape Cold War thinking as both the United States and the Soviet Union fielded fast, long-range interceptors that drew lessons from it. The idea of using technology to build overwhelming advantage became central to American doctrine. In Japan, the trauma pushed a post-war emphasis on quality and advanced tech over mass. The memory of inferiority left a lasting imprint on military thought. Ultimately, the moment Japanese pilots realized they could not outrun or outclimb the P-38 marked the close of an era. The age of the solitary duelist yielded to an industrial age of air war. Technology, production capacity, and systematic innovation as final arbiters. Sakai's reflection that the Lightning broke the Zero pilot's morale captures the change. The P-38 wasn't merely faster or a better climber. It embodied a way of war Japan couldn't meet. Those who survived learned the harsh truth. In modern conflict, courage without technology isn't heroism, it's futility. The Lightning didn't just shoot down airplanes, it shattered a worldview about combat, honor, and national power. The Zero, untouchable in 1941, was obsolete by 1943. Pilots trained for aerobatic duels found their art irrelevant against an enemy who refused that kind of fight. In the end, the twin-tailed devil that haunted their sleep stood for American industry, innovation, and system, forces that would define the latter half of the 20th century. Let the last word be Sakai's. The P-38, he said, taught the hardest lesson, that the age of the samurai was over. In the skies over the Pacific, they met the future. And it broke them. The echo of that collision remains. In war's crucible, technology and industry outweigh tradition and individual valor. The pilots who could neither outclimb nor outrun the lightning learned that lesson at the cost of their lives, their machines, and ultimately their empire's ambitions. They challenged the arsenal of democracy with the spirit of the warrior. The lightning was democracy's reply, delivered at 400 miles per hour from 30,000 feet, with a precision no measure of courage could overcome.